Hello, my name is Keith Sansalone, and I'm excited to share with you my capstone project, creating a toy that helps boys learn empathy. And I hope by the end I can give you some insight into why boys need to be free to play. Every child has a special relationship with play, and I was no different growing up. I have fond memories of the time I spent playing with good friends and my favorite toys. But play isn't just a source of joy for kids, it's actually an essential part of human development. It's how a child begins to learn about the world and the people around them. Through play, children learn how to solve problems, creativity, and how to relate to others. Growing up without any one of these things would be like growing up malnourished. Understanding these things has made me appreciate children's play even more, which is why I was disturbed to learn that for a long time, those benefits haven't been offered equally. I'm talking specifically about the differences between how boys and girls are expected to play with toys. The common conception is that girls should play with things like dolls, and that boys should play with things like construction sets. All these toys are excellent, but they offer different training opportunities. Professor Gina Rapone puts it like this: if girls aren't playing with Lego or other construction toys, then they aren't developing the spatial skills that will help them later in life. If dolls are being pushed on girls and not boys, then boys are missing out on nurturing skills. Everything that toys help teach is equally essential. The problem is they're not equally valued by our culture. Skills typically viewed as feminine are seen as less valuable than those typically viewed as masculine. We encourage girls to play with boy stuff, but not the other way around. The result of this being that many boys have significantly underdeveloped nurturing skills and empathy. Boys who lack those skills struggle to form healthy relationships, have increased feelings of isolation, are prone to acting out, and their mental health and overall well-being suffer. On the other hand, boys who have healthy emotional skills are able to build strong relationships, can work through their difficult emotions, and have improved mental health and their overall well-being. My goal for this project is to design a toy that encourages the development of empathy and emotional skills in young boys. A few guidelines for this project. I wanted this toy to be a passive toy. All that means is that a passive toy doesn't actively do anything itself. A child must creatively engage with it, which creates a much higher quality of play. And I wanted this to be available regardless of gender. While it's primarily intended to be a resource for boys, I wanted to avoid perpetuating the idea that only some types of toys are only for certain types of kids, that certain toys are only for boys or girls, for example. I actually had to solve 3 problems in one for my capstone. First, what kind of toy can even teach these skills? I had to decide what the basic kind of toy is I should choose. What should the toy look like then? And I wanted to understand how it could be made. So I first tackled what kind of toy it should be. To figure that out, I needed to learn more about empathy. I found that empathy is a building block of morality. For people to follow the golden rule, it helps if they can put themselves in someone else's shoes. It's also a key ingredient of successful relationships because it helps us understand the perspectives, needs, and intentions of others. Empathy can roughly be broken down into 3 categories: emotional or affective empathy, sometimes called or could be referred to as sympathy. That's a contagious emotion. When someone is feeling a certain way, often their mood rubs off on you, even though you don't know why they're feeling the way they are, or necessarily what exactly is they're feeling. The next step is cognitive empathy, and where you're actually able to perceive and understand another's emotions. You're able to actually start putting yourself in that person's shoes. And compassionate empathy is simply empathy in action. This is where you would take your understanding and do something about it. You offer a helping hand to someone in need. You bring some soup to a sick friend. Those are very basic examples. I want to focus on cognitive empathy because children are already very good at emotional or affective empathy. They're actually prone to mirroring the emotions of others when they're very young. Cognitive empathy is more of a skill that requires learning. So I understand when can kids learn it to decide on an appropriate toy. By the preschool years, children become more aware that other people have separate bodies, feelings, and experiences. They develop what's called a theory of mind, which enables them to engage in early perspective taking, a precursor to being able to stand in someone else's shoes and actually care about what that feels like. So that's roughly around ages 3 to 4. I then did more research and understood the values of dolls. With hands-on doll play, children model and try on the role of caregiving, as well as imaginative play. These are vital skills in developing a well-adjusted, empathetic child and adult. Continuing to think about dolls and doll play, I happened upon a series of products called Wonder Crew, which is a line of dolls geared towards boys with the gimmick of having shared outfits or costumes in which the boy and the doll can take on a role and sort of make up adventures. Three things generally inspired my final decision for what form this toy should take and some of its features. First, some of the nurturing aspect of this toy. A boy can take on the role of a partner or a caregiver, so there's some flexibility in the way the child can relate to this toy. The imaginative aspect, it highlighted the value of a fantasy scenario in play and learning. And expression. A boy can express himself through this toy in a particular way, this being that shared outfit. And I wanted to have some aspect of the toy in my design that where a child will be able to express himself. Thinking about all these things, I realized that a stuffed animal would be the perfect toy for my design. It can be enjoyed by any child of any age. It has all the benefits of doll play, and it's accessible really for any child. It's not seen to be for just for boys or just for girls, for example. I then had to decide what this stuffed animal should look like. In my initial ideation, I focused on getting out the thoughts that considered what the relationship this toy should have to the child. Should the toy be a caregiver itself? Should the toy be in a costume and go on adventures? I also wanted to think about what this expressive aspect should be. And I thought about these colored patches that could represent emotion. And that aspect of color representing emotion is something that made it into the final design. After my bit of a fixation on possums, I did more research, and something interesting, I realized that in my research that bears are so popular as stuffed animals because they are the most popular animal amongst boys and girls in that split demographic. But surely I thought there's something more effective in learning and teaching what I want to teach. And I've discovered that fantasy allows for more effective learning. It's excellent for pretend play. It exaggerates real-world themes, often exaggerating the nuances of that appear in the real world, making them more digestible for a child. And it often includes moral dilemmas, which helps in the morality building part of empathy. I really wanted to lean into the fantastical avenues that I had, and I wanted to make this toy as expressive as it could be. So I thought, what's more expressive than being able to display multiple expressions. So I wanted this toy to have multiple faces. Having a creature like this is a wonderful perspective-taking opportunity because it prompts a child to think what it must be like to be a creature like this. Their everyday life must be very different than their own. And it stands out from the competition of something like just a normal stuffed teddy bear. Some of the options I had, the theming was either too dark or too chaotic. So I decided to settle on a creature known as a hydra, or in this case, just a serpent with multiple heads, because it's a bit more neutral in its theming, and frankly is an easier design to work around with aesthetics. I then moved on to this ideation for the hydra creature. I wanted to make it a very relatable and sympathetic character, so I give it very soft and round features, large eyes, and a round, large body. I thought a bit about the technical drawings. These drawings were help me make my final model, and I thought a bit about the mechanics of how the eye might work in changing and be able to make this toy even more expressive. After figuring out it should be a hydra, I had to figure out how to make it. I realized I would have to go into 3D modeling in CAD. I decided I wanted to use Blender because it's much easier to work with organic shapes and forms. I also stepped into SolidWorks for objects that needed more precise measurements. This is my final render, or one of them, for what the toy could look like in a normal setting, like just a house. You can see all of its expressive faces and the colorful frills. And here's some more views, a top-down view, a profile view, and you can see the frills changing color. And this is the mechanic of changing colors in order to represent an emotion. A child can choose to associate whatever a color with a particular emotion that they think makes the most sense. Moving on to a physical prototype, I created a sewing template by essentially cutting up my 3D model and labeling it. And this with much work on a sewing machine and a thread and needle, I was able to create this physical prototype and include all the play features that I intended. You can see a few views of again, top, down, and side, and front. These play features represent emotion and being able to make the toy much more expressive. The eyes rotate, so the angle of the eyelids change the expression of the toy. And you can see how magnets inside those fabric frills are able to change between two different colors, where a child can display a different emotion he associates with a color. So to recap on the 3 problems I had to solve, I figured out this toy should be a stuffed animal because it's best for the teaching empathy and emotional learning. I realized it should be a hydra because it's a very expressive creature, and fantasy is excellent at facilitating learning. And I realized it could be made through 3D modeling and hand sewing. And I want to close by saying that all the lessons that play teaches are essential, and no child should lose the chance to learn them. All kids need to be free to play.